It's the early 1980s. New York is loud, raw, unpredictable. You step into a subway car and there it is. Something strange. Not graffiti, not ads, not official. Just bold white chalk, filling the black paper panels on the walls. A baby crawling, with lines of energy radiating from its body. Barking dogs, glowing hearts, human figures dancing like they are made of rhythm. There's no signature, but the style is unmistakable. This is Keith Haring. He doesn't ask for permission. He doesn't wait for approval. He draws where people actually look. Not in galleries, but underground, on the street, in public bathrooms, on playgrounds. For Haring, art isn't something to be sold. It's a language, a pulse, a way to speak when the world stops listening. He draws fast with joy, and later with urgency, because when a virus begins killing his friends, Haring doesn't go quiet. He makes his lines louder, sharper, more defiant. This is the story of an artist who believes art is for everyone. He fills a city with light, and when the darkness comes, he draws anyway. Kutztown, Pennsylvania is a quiet town nestled among the rolling farmlands of Berks County, the kind of place where the air smells of cut grass and cows, where people greet you by name and life unfolds with the unhurried rhythm of a place unbothered by fashion or fame. It's not the kind of place you would expect to produce a global pop art sensation, but then again, Keith Haring was never the kind of kid who followed expectations. Born in 1958 to a church-going working-class family, Keith grows up surrounded by the ordinary comforts of small-town America. Summer fairs, school plays, family dinners around a Formica table. Yet from the time he's old enough to grip a crayon, it becomes clear that he's paying attention to something else. While other kids are chasing footballs or swapping baseball cards, Keith is drawing. Endlessly, obsessively, as though there is something trying to escape through his fingers. His earliest influences aren't gallery masterpieces or oil-painted landscapes, but cartoons, Looney Tunes, Dr. Seuss, Disney, and most of all Peanuts. He studies them with the intensity of a scholar, not just copying their shapes, but deconstructing how they move, how they speak without speaking. His father, Alan, is an amateur cartoonist himself, and the two of them spend long hours hunched over kitchen tables, sketch pads open, pencils tapping, building a private visual language of lines, loops and laughter. Drawing isn't just a hobby for Keith. It's a way of thinking, of processing the world. He draws in class, on napkins, in church bulletins, on the margins of test papers. Anything blank becomes a surface waiting to be filled. His notebooks overflow with vibrating figures and fantastical creatures, always in motion, always alive. And in the process, he learns something essential, that clarity is power, that a simple shape, repeated with rhythm and confidence, can hit the eye harder than any perfectly rendered detail. By high school, he's grown into a lanky, soft-spoken teenager with mismatched socks and a taste for psychedelia. He listens to the Grateful Dead, reads Kerouac, and already speaks about art with a seriousness most adults reserve for politics or religion. He doesn't fit in and doesn't particularly care to. His mind is somewhere else, somewhere bigger. In 1976, just 18, he leaves Kutztown behind and moves to Pittsburgh to study commercial art. But almost immediately he knows he's made a mistake. The focus on advertising and design, on selling things, leaves him cold. There's too much polish, not enough purpose. It feels like packaging the truth instead of telling it. So barely a year in, he drops out. Not because he's failed, but because he knows that what he needs won't be found in tidy classrooms or branding workshops. He's looking for something raw, something alive, and he knows exactly where to find it. In 1978, Keith Haring boards a Greyhound bus and heads east to New York City, carrying nothing more than a duffel bag, a portfolio full of scribbled sketches, and the unshakable belief that art should belong to everyone. Horns, voices, the rumble of the subway below, and the first distant echo of a boombox. What he finds there will change not only his life, but the face of public art. Because in the chaos of the city, on the walls, on the sidewalks, in the tunnels beneath it all, Keith Haring finally finds his canvas. New York City in 1978 is a city in chaos, electric, dangerous, alive. The streets are cracked and pulsing. The skyline looms like a rusted crown. And underneath it all, the subway system, filthy, loud, covered in graffiti, rumbles like the city's unconscious mind. For Keith Haring, it's love at first sight. He arrives with no money, no connections, and no real plan. Just that same restless energy in his hands. He lives in a tiny East Village apartment, eats cheap food, and spends most of his days walking, watching, listening. The whole city feels like it's vibrating with creative tension. Galleries downtown, breakdancers in the park, punk bands thrashing in clubs that look like basements. He studies it all. And then one day, in the grey, flickering light of a subway platform, Keith notices something. It's nothing really. A blank, matte black panel where an ad should be. One of the transit authority's empty poster slots, covered in smooth black paper. To most people, it's just a mistake, or maybe a delay in advertising. But to Keith, it's an invitation, a canvas. The next day, he comes back with chalk in his coat pocket. White chalk, the kind kids use on sidewalks. He waits for the right moment. Not too many people around, but enough to see. He kneels down in front of the panel, and he starts to draw. The lines come fast, fluid, without hesitation. A baby crawling, radiating light. Barking dogs with their heads thrown back. Flying saucers, dancing men. The whole surface comes alive with rhythm and motion, and then he gets on the train and disappears. No name, no explanation, no gallery opening. And over the next few months he does it again, and again, and again. He moves through the subway system like a ghost, from Brooklyn to the Bronx, always with a stick of chalk in hand. He draws between rush hours, in seconds flat, always watching over his shoulder. The city becomes his studio, the commuters his audience. And what he's doing is illegal. Technically, it's vandalism. But people don't see it that way. In a space filled with grime and decay, his drawings pop, clean, energetic, joyful. They make people stop. They make people smile. They belong here. Haring understands something instinctively, that art isn't sacred. It doesn't need frames or plaques. It needs eyes. It needs people. And the subway, raw, democratic, unpredictable, is the perfect place. Security guards start to recognise him. Some look the other way, some don't. He's arrested, multiple times. Dragged away, chalk still on his fingers. But he doesn't stop. The subway becomes more than a canvas. It becomes a kind of message board. He starts responding to news, to politics, to racism, homophobia, fear. Sometimes he finishes a drawing and steps back to find a crowd gathering. People ask questions. They touch the drawings. They smile. They argue. They see. And in those moments, Keith Haring knows something deep and unshakable. This is what he was meant to do. He's no longer a kid copying cartoons at a kitchen table in Pennsylvania. He's an artist speaking in public, in real time, to real people, using nothing but line and speed and courage. The city is listening. By the early 1980s, Keith's chalk drawings have become an underground phenomenon. Subway riders recognise the baby crawling with radiant lines. Street kids imitate his barking dogs. The city, gritty and bruised, suddenly feels a little lighter, like someone set it on fire with joy. But Keith wants more than fleeting chalk on black paper. He wants his art to last. He starts bringing his bold lines above ground, painting murals on walls, designing T-shirts and posters, and filling galleries with his unmistakable energy. His first solo show opens in 1982 at the Tony Shafrazi Gallery in Soho, a tiny space transformed by his dancing figures and vivid shapes. The art world, sceptical at first, can't ignore him for long. Critics talk about raw energy, pop vernacular, and an artist who speaks the language of the streets. Collectors snap up his work, celebrities wear his designs, and his friends include everyone, from Madonna to Jean-Michel Basquiat. He's a kid from Pennsylvania who just refuses to stop drawing. And suddenly, he's everywhere. But fame isn't what drives him. Keith is still the same artist who sketched with his dad, the kid who found meaning in a subway station's empty ad space. He believes art should be for everyone, not just the rich, not just the elite. To keep that promise, he opens the Pop Shop in 1986, a small store in Soho selling affordable prints, t-shirts, buttons and posters. It's his way of breaking down walls between art and people, commerce and creativity. No exclusivity here, just joy, colour and connection. And just as his star rises, a shadow falls over the city and the art world. The AIDS epidemic begins to claim the lives of many in his circle, friends, collaborators, lovers. Keith watches as the vibrant community he loves is hit with fear, stigma and silence. But instead of retreating, he channels his pain into his work. His lines grow sharper, his messages louder. He draws hearts with bold crosses, dancing figures holding each other, images that demand love and action. He uses his art as activism, a way to fight ignorance with light. Keith Haring's story is more than just graffiti or fame. It's about finding your voice when the world tries to shut you down. It's about drawing your truth, no matter the odds. And it's about believing that even in the darkest moments, art can be a beacon. By the late 1980s, the vibrant energy that once filled Keith Haring's work begins to shift. He is diagnosed with AIDS in 1988, a disease still shrouded in fear, misunderstanding and silence. The symptoms come slowly at first: fatigue, weight loss, strange rashes, but the disease is relentless. Friends around him fall ill, some die. For many, this would be a moment to retreat, to give in to despair, but Keith Haring refuses. If anything, his art becomes sharper, more urgent, a beacon blazing in the darkest night. His lines grow bold and defiant, his images filled with both pain and hope. He paints figures embracing, hearts surrounded by crosses, radiant babies still crawling toward the light. He channels everything he feels, fear, anger, love, into his work. His art becomes a form of resistance, a voice for the voiceless. He doesn't just fight the disease, he fights the stigma, the silence. In 1989, Keith opens the Keith Haring Foundation to support AIDS organisations and children's programmes, making sure the fight continues beyond him. He gives interviews, speaks out, and never stops creating. As his body weakens, his spirit remains unbroken. Even his final works, painted on large canvases and sculptures, burst with energy and life. Keith Haring dies on February the 16th, 1990, at the age of 31. But his legacy? That lives on. Every subway station still echoes with his lines. Every t-shirt and poster still carries his message, that art is for everyone, that love is stronger than fear, that even in the darkest times a single line, a single act of creation can change the world. Keith Haring's life was brief, but his light is endless. He dared to draw on every surface, in every corner, until the city itself was a canvas. And in doing so, he reminded us all to keep drawing, no matter what.